This episode of the Stir Crazy podcast is a crossover with American Legacy Network, where I'm the host of Memoir, Noir. American Legacy Network is a family business. In 1995, my father, Rodney J. Reynolds, founded American Legacy magazine as a joint venture with Forbes. Today, American Legacy is a multimedia content producer still committed to developing and marketing products that celebrate Black history and culture. On Memoir Noir, I interview Black history makers whose stories we need to know, like my guest for this conversation, Stefanie Brown James, an innovative social entrepreneur and co-founder of the Collective, a group of organizations dedicated to supporting Black political candidates. Thanks for tuning in.
There are no off years for elections. Elections are on all day, every year. So we have to always be in go mode.
Take a little break from the crazy, try to recalibrate. Every day seem to be hazy, I see doom. Everybody sick with obsession, it's hard to navigate. Take your baggage out of my space, I need room. Reset. New world order. Reset. New world order.
We are live now. It looks like we are live. What's going on, good people out there in the universe? My name is JP Reynolds. I am the host of American Legacy Network's Memoir Noir, where I am having some really dope conversations with Black history makers. This is a history platform, but history is also current. There are people making history right here and now. And I'm incredibly excited to have a conversation with one of these history makers that I'm talking to today. Her name is Stefanie Brown James, and this is big boss energy today. This is big boss. You see the head wrap. This is big boss energy today.
I had to come with all my sister glory today.
Yeah, all of that drip, all of that sister glory today. So we got somebody very special. Stefanie Brown James is co-founder of and a senior advisor of the Collective, which is a consortium of organizations, including the Collective PAC and Collective Future. Stefanie's done a bunch of different work in the political space. She's an innovative social entrepreneur, and I'm excited to have this conversation today. She brings a lot of experience to the table, a lot of experience. If you go to like the Collective PAC website, it's literally like every single Black elected official in the country. It's really impressive what Stefanie's been able to build and the things she's been able to contribute to the growth of our political economy as Black folks in the African-American community and the Black American community. So I'm excited to have this conversation, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, JP. I'm excited to talk to you as well. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, and I'm just so proud of the work that you're doing, everything that your dad is doing. I mean, I remember when American Legacy was first talked about.
Yes.
And so to see it now all these years, continuing to press forward, man, it feels really good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. You're referencing those days at Antioch Baptist Church back in Cleveland, Ohio.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, which you probably were in like high school last time, maybe even middle school.
I may have been younger. Yeah.
May have been younger than that. I know. And it's your mom made my sister's wedding dress. So like when I say we go back long time, we really do.
That's right. Absolutely. We go back a ways. And I'm actually interested to hear, your story going back to your entry point in politics. You have this political experience, and I'd love to hear how you got into it. What's your point of entry into the political game?
Yeah, I definitely would say my initial point of entry is to me, at my core, I am a person that was trained up through the civil rights lens. Mm-hmm. When I was 14, I joined the Cleveland NAACP Youth Council. And the first meeting I went to was elected president. And I'm like, I don't even know what this is. You know what I mean? I had heard about the NAACP, but, as a kid, you kind of hear about things in terms of history's sake, not to your point with this whole conversation about what's happening today and how we're making history today. And so I became a volunteer youth member. I literally went through college at Howard University, still affiliated with the NAACP. And so when it came time for my first job, I knew I only wanted to work for the association, which at the time was headquartered in Baltimore. And so I was National Youth Council Coordinator, National Youth and College Division Director. I became National Field Director for the NAACP. And really my job was to work with our units all across the country to help them engage in civil rights activities around the country, to help provide education, resources, and also to make sure that they had everything they needed for civic engagement and voting. And so we had over 2,200 units at the time. And, at 20 something years old, I am developing the field program for it. And so for me, that's really where my roots are, is in grassroots organizing and civil rights advocacy work. And it's really kind of propelled me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Shout out to the NAACP that's been so enduring and so necessary for such a long period of time.
Right.
You've gotten to the space. Obviously, you gained so much experience with the NAACP and being with an organization that advocates on behalf of Black folks. You've built a political action committee. So, in the spirit of political education, because I know that the word PAC gets thrown around a lot. We see it on commercials. We see tweets and headlines about it. A lot of folks may not actually know what that means. So, in that spirit of just political education, can you break down what a political action committee actually is and what it does?
Yeah. So essentially, what a PAC is, political action committee, is it's a group of individuals or entity that comes together to support candidates that are running for office. And by support, that primarily is financial support, but it can also be support in other kind of resource ways. And so for us specifically with the Collective PAC, which my husband Quentin and I started in 2016, we knew that there was a real need to support Black candidates who are running for office on a local, state, and federal level to have the money they needed to be successful early on. Because what happens oftentimes in politics is Black folks running kind of with everything, we get the last resources. People don't fund Black candidates like they support white candidates. They will get less money and donations received. And so we knew that it was important for Black candidates to have a strong start when they started their campaigns. And so I even think about when Stacey Abrams ran for governor a few years back, we were one of the first organizations to give her money. Now, nobody can understand that considering how popular Stacey Abrams is now. But at the time, people were trying to figure out who was she? Was she a viable candidate? Could she win? And so therefore, resources weren't flowing to her as they should have in the beginning of her campaign. So our PAC really is working to be the backbone for candidates to help propel them to success. We also help to provide trainings to candidates, also trainings to Black campaign operatives, because somebody has to work on all these campaigns. And so we try to make sure that from a cultural lens and from a building Black political power lens, that we can be that resource to help these candidates, which ultimately will help the people in our community as they work to progress an agenda forward that will elevate, protect, support Black people in this country.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm curious how your process of discovery, how your process of vetting, how how you determine whether a candidate is viable or not. What's that process like? Because there's so many folks that y'all support. And I'm just like, how you find them folks? And when you talk about Stacey Abrams before she blew up, that means you did some discovery work. That's like you said, you're a grassroots organizer. I'm curious as to how you're finding folks.
Well, one, let me say we have a great team. We have a dynamic staff overall. And actually, we started as a collective PAC. We've now grown to have 5 organizations under our kind of collective banner. And so we have a team of about, I think, 25 staff from all across the country. So we have a dynamic political staff headed up by Chris Scott, who essentially his job and his team's job is to both find candidates, but also candidates come to us a lot of times. So they'll come to collectivepac.org and they'll fill out our questionnaire, which is the first step of our endorsement process. Is we have everyone interested in receiving our endorsement and support. They have to complete this questionnaire, which is giving us a baseline sense of where do they stand on policy priorities and issues related to advancing the Black community forward. And so, we're asking questions about, do they believe in supporting public education? Because we know that that's really important for Black families. Do they believe in having an equal wage between men and women? And so we ask about 40 questions in this questionnaire. We also take a look at how their campaign is structured. So do they have staff? Have they already started to raise money? Do they have a bank account? Kind of the basics of what you need to be successful. Because to be quite honest, if you're running for Congress these days, it takes, a few $1 million to now have a congressional race. So if you're asking for an endorsement and you don't even have a campaign staff, you're almost at a place where even our investment wouldn't be able to help you be successful. You know what I mean? So we expect candidates to have, a website presence, social media presence, for us to say, okay, they are serious about this campaign and we want to help take them across the finish line. So yeah, we vet everybody. We also look at polling. We look at, what's happening in the news with candidates. We look at their backgrounds. What have they done for the community already? And so we take all these things to account. And I'm excited to say that in the last almost 5 years, we've helped over 150 Black candidates win their races.
Wow.
And so that's what it's all about. But we're trying to build the bench and make sure folks can be successful.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. This is a necessary time for all of that. And one of the things that comes to mind when I think about the political space that Black folks are continuing, because we've done this for a long time, but the political space that we're continuing to occupy is the fact that in the history of Black organizing, right? You have a history in the NAACP and grassroots organizing. In the history of Black organizing and even political spaces, there seems to have been a shift, right? I mean, at least for me, and from my perspective of looking at the history of this, more prominent leaders have usually operated in the past, in history, in terms of being politically affiliated or politically adjacent or politically aligned, but not necessarily holding political office. So I think about like all of the organizers that don't have the big famous names, right? Like Bayard Rustin and Ella Baker,
Yeah, my faves. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Those are the ones for a lot of us. And it seems as though, especially now, social organizing is making it such that we have a directly political movement now, right? With your PAC and with folks getting elected to office. I'm thinking of Cori Bush. I'm thinking of Jermaine Williams. I'm thinking of like all of these, a lot of folks who are on your site, right? who are activists and people who are in the field and in the street at some politically aligned or politically adjacent organizations who are now holding political office. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, from somebody like you who's doing this work, I'm curious what you think about how history will look back at what feels like an evolution.
Yeah. And it's important that we have that evolution. I think our activities and the work we do should meet the times that we're in. And so we are definitely at a moment where I think people have made the real connection that in order to change the laws in this country, we must change the lawmakers. It is paramount. We cannot expect some old 80-year-old white man who has no respect or interest in elevating the Black community to create policies that are going to actually make our everyday lives better. And that is, it's important because from the local, state, and federal level, on all levels of government, someone is making the decisions of how your life is going to be impacted. So our lives are impacted every single day by politics, by policies that someone creates. The city council determines, how much money does your police department get? Are there going to be services for mental health awareness and mental health responses to situations that now have police responses to it? The sheriff oftentimes is voted on by voters, or sometimes they're decided on by the mayor. And so in order for us to have policies created and in place that we think is going to make the lives of Black people better and also really bring about representative democracy in this country, to be able to change the lawmakers so that they do respect and reflect the communities that they serve in. And so I think we're totally in that moment where people make that connection. And so therefore, they see that there is a natural connection between grassroots organizing, being a community activist and a leader, and being the person to say, I know and love my community enough to now be the policy maker to say, these are some of the laws that we need to have in place to make my community better. And so I'm just excited that, this evolution continues to take place, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. I'm curious too, what you think about what that means for the future of of organizing, of the grassroots organizing, the folks that are often, there's decision makers, and then there's, with that, with our process and our representative democracy, right? There's decision makers, and then there's folks who push on the decision makers. And I'm curious as to what this means for the future of the pushers of the envelope.
The pushers remain paramount. We gotta have the pushers because, even when people have the best intentions when they get into office, there's so many different priorities. There's so many different people and situations that are pulling at them that it's important to have those grassroots organizers who can say, nah, remember, you say you were going to help do X, Y, and Z, or, hey, this is what's happening on my block. Can I have a conversation with you and we can figure out how we can create legislation to address this issue? So it really is the grassroots organizers and the community leaders that can help influence what are the laws that need to be created, what are the laws that need to be taken off the books or changed. They're the ones who hold elected leaders accountable, but they also hold our communities accountable because, we have to play a part in the process. I think the most important piece of this puzzle is voters. It's the community. And so, it's important for us to be engaged because, again, in order to change the laws, we got to change the lawmakers. But first, we have to be able to say what it is that we want, how we think our lives can be improved, and how we can be partners in making all that possible.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also thinking about, Judas and the Black Messiah just came out.
Mm-hmm.
I've had so many feelings about it.
Have you watched it already?
Oh yeah, I've watched it 1.5 times. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful tragedy of a film. And we've talked about decision makers, we talk about the pushers.
Yeah.
And then Fred Hampton, to speak in his name, and all of the folks that he worked with, Mother Akua, like these are coalition builders.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I'm not gonna give the film away. Hopefully folks take some time to watch it, in addition to signing up for American Legacy Network.tv. But the effort to build coalitions seems also paramount, right?
Yeah.
So the history of Fred Hampton, the history of a lot of folks in a lot of these movement spaces has been to garner the power of the people, regardless of skin tone or zip code. And I'm also wondering where that is in this process too, because that was obviously a threat. That's a threat. That the pushers are the pushers of the envelope that we just mentioned. When you're a change maker, when you're a person who's elected, you are a threat. That's a part of it that I feel like a lot of us don't always talk about or come to terms with, but that's a piece of it. But I'm also wondering how you think the coalition building is necessary, especially in today's political climate where it feels so stratified and so divided. I'm wondering what you think about the power of coalition building, particularly in this moment.
Yeah, it's crucial. First, I'm just so excited that this film is out. I've been able to engage with Macro before, the one of the executive producing teams that brought the movie together, and the fact that Macro is helmed by a Black man and his Black wife to make this Black film about this dynamic Black American patriot hero is significant and it's beautiful. And Fred Hampton started out in the youth council of NAACP. And so for me, he's always been a person that I specifically growing up was like, he's walked my path, like as far as being a young person and, discovering that you can be a change agent. And I think part of that discovery is also realizing, no, but you can't do anything by yourself. And also your struggle is not yours alone. And as you said, JP, your struggle also isn't dictated just by your skin color, but it is dictated by so many facets. And so I think that's why it is often threatening to the powers that be, a status quo and really white supremacy, when you have people start to realize that their similarities are more pronounced than their differences. And so when you start to have poor white people come together with disenfranchised Black people, and when you start to have migrant workers come together with those who are fighting for, with domestic workers, I think that it is something that we've seen a lot of progress in people coming together to support each other and come in coalition building. I think this last year, especially, post George Floyd, we've seen a lot more allyship and a lot more folks coming together, but there's a lot of work that we have to do there. I think specifically, I'd love to see there be more connection between Black people and the African diaspora. I think us being engaged more so with what's happening in the Caribbean and Africa is extremely important, but also Black people in the Latinx community, I think is extremely important. And then finally, economics is everything in America. And there are too many people that are struggling, and it's not just about race, but it's too many people that are struggling that need to come together and say, hey, your struggle was my struggle. I don't care if you white, Black, Asian or whatever. We have some commonalities here, and we really need to come together to figure out how we can support an agenda to create change. And so I think I'm so happy you brought that point up, because we got to have the coalitions in order to keep progressing forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that there's work behind that too. Absolutely. There's work all over the place for it.
Yeah, the work don't never end.
The work don't never end. And speaking of work, I do want to talk to you about some of your own journey here. You are a CEO, you are a decision maker yourself, you are a co-founder, you're a partner, right? And again, you're a decision maker. This is big boss energy we got here. And I would love to hear your experience. What has been your experience in running organizations, especially you're a person who's kind of come up the ranks. I mean, you can't really run an organization without coming up the ranks, but you started in youth council, right? You came up and now you are running organizations. What is that experience like?
Tough. Cool. Awesome. Some days you cry, some days you drink champagne, you know what I mean? I appreciate you saying about the coming up in it, because a lot of people, not all leaders come up in a way that helps inform how they make decisions. And so I think for me, because I have been involved in various organizations and various work, and most importantly, I have realized that at the end of the day, you have to be a good person. Like, to be a good decision maker, a good boss, a good leader, you have to be a good person. You have to understand that your title makes you no better than anyone else. And also you have a responsibility to the people that you work with. And so I think, my husband, Quentin, and I, we are, I guess you could say, the co-bosses of the collective, which also is not easy working with your spouse. Let me just say that, especially when you're in the same house with 2 toddlers. Lord Jesus, help us. But, it is important that as we think about the decisions we make with the organization, that we keep in mind the 25 employees we have, because that's their bread and butter. The decisions we make impact their families' lives. Not let alone how the organization is going to show up, in the world and the changes that we're going to make. And so that makes us very conscious of making the right decisions, because there's a bunch of folks that are depending on us to do so. But then I also think that, ego can really diminish good work that could happen. And so constantly working to not have ego appear in decisions, I think for me and for Quentin has boded very well for us, because, we try to make decisions in a way that's what's best for the organization and not just what's best for me and him. It allows more opportunities for your team to step up and have suggestions and to help dictate the agenda. It helps to open up the doorway for more collaborations and partnerships, because you don't have ego driving the conversation. And so, I think that those things are important. And then lastly, just being open to being innovative and having new ideas. I mean, when we started the collective, nobody would have thought, I can tell you, that we'd be, a 20 million plus, organization. Like, we ain't playing games over here, but we've been able to grow and been able to fundraise and be successful because I think we work to both be innovative, but have metrics that goes with our innovation, so we can show and we can prove the impact that we're having, so people know we are a trusted resource for their dollars. Candidates know we're a trusted resource to help them win and create change in their communities. But it keeps us focused on also just not being blindsided by doing everything under the sun. We are really squarely focused on what our lane is. And so being innovative, but also being disciplined has really helped us, I think, to be successful bosses.
Word. I love that response. And I want to talk to you about innovation and entrepreneurship. But first, I do want to kind of go a little bit deeper on this ego piece.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important piece for so many folks. And really the question is, what are your habits or what are your methods or processes to confront your ego and to keep it in check, to diminish it, whatever is necessary in that moment to be a good leader? Do you have processes or methods for that?
And one, I think it's important that everybody has an accountability partner in their life. Somebody that's going to keep it all the way 100 with you. Like, they're going to let you know, okay, you tripping, like, all right, slow your roll. For me, it happens to be my husband, who happens to be my business partner. So for us, we can help check each other. Like, yo, you really need to fall back because you sound stupid right now. You know what I mean? Like, and just to have real talk. So to me, that kind of accountability person is important in your life. And I don't care what your job is. To have that safe space person is important. I also think that, again, you really should treat people how you want to be treated. And that sounds like so cliche, but it is so. You start to see folks in leadership positions and they talk down to their staff, like they expect people to do work that they themselves have never done or would never do. And I don't get that. And I don't appreciate that, because most leaders would not be successful if it were not for the team of folks helping to implement the plan or the vision or holding them up. And so you got to treat people right. And also, this world is so small. You know what I mean? You talking mad stuff about somebody, you go somewhere, oh, shoot, they your boss at the next place. You don't never know. You know what I mean? So I think for me, just always making sure, like, am I being a good person right now is a real big guiding principle for me. And my parents taught me that. They're both public school educators, retired now, but grew up in Jackson, Mississippi in the 40s and 50s, and recognizing how far I've been able to come because of their sacrifices, and how dare I mess up opportunities because I want to have an ego. That don't jive for me. So
that's a great perspective, right? I mean, in terms of, especially that last piece you just talked about, where like we come from folks.
Yeah,
we come from folks. That's important.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And I do want to ask you about the innovation and the entrepreneurship, because it would be one thing if, and this would be a great thing if you were to rise through ranks at another established organization, like maybe the NAACP or wherever have you, all these great organizations that have been around for so long, doing great work. It'd be one thing to, stick to that space or stay with a space that is established or well-known or whatever have you. And plenty of people do that and they're doing great work. But it's another thing to say, I'm going to found or co-found an organization that speaks to these issues. I'm going to now be an entrepreneur. I'm going to start something. And I'm curious as to what that has been for you, because, on one hand, you're in a political space. So there's content that there's people that there's networks, there's processes that But on the other hand, you're an entrepreneur, right? And it's like, that's an entirely differently shaped hat.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how you've fit into that hat and what your experience has been wearing that hat as an entrepreneur.
Well, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they fall into it. They always say, like, entrepreneurship is being able to fill a void or address a need or a concern, and, a product or an organization or a company or whatever, it comes out of that experience. I think for me, that's definitely true. If I had my way back in the day, I would have never left the NAACP. Like, I saw myself by the time I was 16 years old, it was the only thing I ever wanted to do, all the way up until about 28 years old. There were circumstances where I had to leave the organization because my ideals and values and thoughts of how we could really be impactful did not line up with the organizations. And so that, plus I ended up joining President Obama's campaign as the National African American Vote Director in 2012, which really was my first I think, foray into like the for real political world, which taught me so much. You know, that those two, leaving the NAACP, joining the Obama campaign, this political world, this fast-paced presidential campaign world, made me see, one, I did not want to go to the White House post-campaign. And that usually is kind of the trajectory where people are trying to get it, you know, go into the administration. I knew at that point I was tired of giving speeches and saying on behalf of so-and-so, you know, on behalf of this president, on behalf of that president, on behalf of this person. I wanted to say on behalf of me. This is how I feel. This is what I think. And I wanted to be my own boss. And so Quentin and I actually, we consider ourselves social entrepreneurs because we first started a consulting firm, which we still have to this day. It's called Vested Strategies. We do civic and community engagement consulting work. And so we worked with everyone from the State Department to Google and Ford Foundation, SEIU, on civic engagement strategies or social justice strategies. So that's a separate thing that we have from the collective. And it's because we wanted to be able to create solutions that we thought were needed in whatever space it was that we were working in. And so when it came to the collective, you know, this is post, you know, 2016 was post Michael Brown. It was at a moment where there was so much happening with regards to law enforcement and people just really like not waking up, but just the injustices were just so on our screens. It was like, whoa, there is not one Black, you know, person who's on city council in Ferguson, Missouri. Hold up. How? Why? What can we do to help solve this? So the collective was really born in that spirit. We started in August of 2016, and then November, here come Trump being elected. So it was like, oh, the timing called for the collective to be born and for our entrepreneurial spirit to be birthed through that. And I also think, especially when you're creating organizations, you think about it with purpose and mission in mind and not the monetization of it. And, you know, in no way did we ever go into any work with thinking like, how are we going, if anything, we struggled. And you have to be prepared for struggles when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, when we started the collective, we had a 1-year-old son. We tried to figure out, okay, how are we going to split this Happy Meal? Because we ain't got enough money for all of us to eat. You know what I mean? Like, and it was hard. It was hard because a lot of resources dried up when Trump came into office. And, you know, if I could just say that really being clear on your mission, your vision for your organization or the work you want to do, understanding that it is important to have a game plan that, you know, to figure out who's your supporters, because when there's times when you may hit a rough patch, who can you call on to help, you know, give you $100 so your lights don't get turned off? You know, I just think it's important to know that it's not all about the glitz and glam that may come with, you know, what your entrepreneurial endeavor is, but it really is about birthing an idea that will help contribute to the greater society and staying focused on the mission and not just, you know, monetization of it.
Yeah. That's good. It also sounds like you're doing some advice in there at the end for folks who maybe wanting to get into being social entrepreneurs, right? Just some takeaways, especially for folks who are looking to maybe professionally support political movements, right? Because this is a political movement you've talked about. You talked about your time with Obama and why that's why you didn't want to go into the White House.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a different world, I'm sure.
It's a different, you know what? And now, Ross, you got to know yourself. Let me say that. You got to know yourself. I got to a certain point where I was just like, well, let me not say that. I feel like I've always been the kind of person where, ironically, I got a problem with authority oftentimes. Like, unless a person is like really making sense to me, I don't like to do stuff that don't make sense. Like, or doing it just to do it, or just because you say to do it. Nah, I'm going to ask some questions. So for me, I was just like, the rigor in the of being in administration, you can't do this, you can't say this. I was like, nah, that ain't the life for me right now where I was at that point in time. And yeah, you got to know yourself to know what is the right environment that you are going to grow. You know, they say bloom where you are planted. Well, don't plant yourself in a place where your type of flower will not bloom. You can't put a cactus everywhere. The cactus blooms in a certain environment. You can't put a rose everywhere. You can't put a vineyard everywhere. You have to plant yourself where the soil is fertile for you to grow and to stretch. and to be your best self. And so I think that's important for entrepreneurs, and just not even entrepreneurs, just for people in general, where you working somewhere and you are so unhappy. Check the soil. Maybe where you are is, and be okay with sometimes stepping out on faith in a calculated way. And I say that by saying, it helps if you can save up some money if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. So if you do hit a rough patch, you got a little something in the bank. So don't leave your job yet. You ain't got no money in the bank. You know what I mean? Like, be calculated, but don't be afraid to take risk either.
Yeah, risk is important. That, or at least the balance of risk and being risk averse is important.
Yes, it is. It's very important.
Very important. I'm curious as to what maybe risks you're excited about, or what new things coming about, especially in your space, you're excited about coming in the future.
I'm excited about, we were able to do a lot of great work this past election cycle with some dynamic, brilliant folks in the entertainment space, and just their level of activism. I think about, the work this past cycle that like Regina King and Kerry Washington and Michael Ealy and Tracee Ellis Ross, and, just so many dynamic, I don't even call them, they're so much more than just celebrities, but I'm excited to see where that work can go and how we can help give voice and help determine, how best folks use their platforms for the public good to create progressive change. I mean, I think we've seen a lot with what's happened with NBA players, with NFL players. To see where they take their activism, to me, is really exciting, and how we can play a role in furthering that and helping them hone in on, having their voice be loud and heard in creating policy changes, I think is really exciting. So that's something that we're kind of looking at, and I'm hoping to see how that expands out.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely an exciting time for all of that. And thank you. I want to say thank you, because you are one of the folks who are on the ground. Like, again, it's been a very tumultuous year, of course, with everything that's been going on with the entire world. But it's also been a lot of light that's come.
Definitely. Yeah.
Especially with the way that a lot of elections turned out. A lot of folks are now in spaces where they are decision makers, change makers, and not just envelope pushers. So thank you for your work, and thank you for the work that you've been able to activate in other people.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's a really real thing, and it's been a historic time, which is, this conversation of looking to the future and looking at the present with the historic lens is a special time to do that. What do you feel about the historic nature of this space and time? I know I've done a lot of thinking back to other eras or other years where it felt like a watershed moment. I've thought a lot about 1918. I've thought a lot about 1968 and what that year meant for health and wellness and political economy and all of those things. I'm curious as to what you think has just happened in 2020 and what that may mean in the grander scheme of things for how we're continuing to build and form a better representative democracy.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with everything you said. I mean, this is a watershed moment. I think 2020, we saw, especially Black people, have like a reclamation on our humanity. We were able to say in as clear terms possible that how things have been going can no longer be the status quo. And in that, I feel like we found a more collective voice, a deeper commitment to the work, and also feeling more powerful about the role in which Black people have and do and will continue to make this country all that it says that it is, to have justice and freedom and democracy and justice for all, And so, and this kind of goes back to your last question, one of the things that I'm also looking forward to us doing more, and I'm really proud about, is we were able to have one of the largest Black civic engagement campaigns this year through one side of our work with, we have a campaign called Vote to Live. And specifically through Vote to Live, we had a mission to target non-engaged Black voters. So those folks who, many of us were tired of getting political ads and, You see it on the news and you get the robocalls and the text messages. And we got tired of that stuff. There are so many people, though, that didn't get any of those messages because, unfortunately, the political system oftentimes thinks that if you don't vote in this year, or you don't vote in that year, you're never going to be a voter. So we're never going to talk to you again. Well, no, these people just haven't been talked with, empowered, educated on how they can play a role in the political process, why it is important, how it does impact their lives. And so, we had a real focus on how can we help empower those people who feel powerless and voiceless through having them see voting is such a strong key in helping to create change. And I think that's why you saw the results you did in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Georgia, because people were able to reclaim their voices as a collective Black people. And so, this to me, I think is not a trend. I think it is the way that we are moving forward because you have dedicated organizations and people that are working to make that happen. Where we're not talking about non-presidential years as if it's an off-year election. There are no off years for elections. Elections are on all day, every year. So we have to always be in go mode, but we have to make sure that we don't leave people out where they don't feel their power in the process. And so I think that's the gift of 2020 is the empowerment of folks. And I'm looking forward to how that expands this year as many cities are electing new mayors. Most of the big cities are electing new mayors this year. I don't know if folks know that, and city council members. So you're going to have a lot of changes on the local level. And the local level is where it's at when it comes to how your life is impacted. When your trash gets picked up, like everything, what kind of curriculum is in your schools for your kids, So it's I think we'll continue to see this change push into this year. And I'm grateful for that aspect of 2020.
Yeah. Well, we are grateful for you. Again, thank you for empowering folks and activating folks and allowing, folks to be in positions to better represent folks in the Black community. Is there anything else? You dropped a lot of gems on us today, right? I'm going to be sitting with don't plant where you can't bloom. That's a word, But is there any other thing that you want to leave us with before we wrap up? So you've left us with plenty of words, but if there's any last words you want to leave us with, I would love to give you the final word before we close out.
We've heard a lot about self-care being necessary, especially for Black folks, Black women, especially, who often are the burden holders of all of our stuff and everybody else's stuff. But I think about that a lot. I kind of mentioned before, I have 2 children, Carter and Elijah. Carter is my Black history baby, named after Carter G. Woodson. Mm-hmm. I want to throw that out there. Elijah is our Bible baby, named after the prophet Elijah in the Bible. And a lot of times people will be like, oh man, I know you're so busy. Like, da-da-da-da. I am busy. I am very busy. I probably have a schedule that, a lot of folks would be like, no, I ain't doing that. You know what I mean? But I am intentional about taking time for my family. And I just think in this work, knowing what your borders are is very important. And creating borders for yourself is very important. Like, there are certain times you are not going to get me or Quentin because we're with our kids. So it doesn't matter, the size of the organization that we run or the work that is ahead of us. Our priority, first and foremost, is our children. It's us as a couple, and it's us as individuals. And so I just think, for people that are in this space, please make sure that you have, or interested in whatever it is that you do, no matter the work, just be real clear and stick to your boundaries, because you cannot, as people say, you cannot, give from an empty well. That is so true. And I think the older I get, I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago. I just have become like dogmatic about my time. And also to know that it's okay to sometimes don't do anything. Sit on the couch, watch some shows, read a book. We like to play video games in my household with a 3 and 5-year-old, which probably sounds totally irresponsible, but we love it. Have those moments of like woosah I think is just really, really important. So that would be the last word that, I leave you on, and just want to express my appreciation to you, JP, and to your dad, Rodney, and to your family. Like, I just think it is so important for us I love American Black history, Black people. We are American legacy. My new thing now is like, we are the ultimate patriots. We love this country despite its ills. In such a crazy way, because we know what our people have done to get us to where we are, and to make this country ours. And so I just am so grateful for the American Legacy platform to make our history front and center, and to make our present front and center. So thank you for this opportunity. I was so excited to get your DM and emails, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for you and for all of this.
Yes, thank you again. And in the spirit of your child Carter, happy Black History Month, right? To everybody who's tuned in.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you again for joining us, and for everybody who's tuned in, thank you for joining. And if you have not already subscribed or have visited the website, AmericanLegacyNetwork.tv, please do so. There's all types of content, all types of information, all types of everything, really. So again, thank you for all the folks who tuned in. Stephanie, thank you for joining. Best of luck on all it's always go mode, always in season. So thank you, and keep doing the thing, because we need it.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. All right.
God will, and that's what we plan to do, and you do the same.
Yes, indeed. Peace to you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stir Crazy. Don't forget to follow the podcast at Stir Crazy Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. On Twitter, you can find me at Stir Crazy Pod. This is a completely independent venture, so your subscriptions and donations are more than welcome. You can support the podcast at patreon.com/JP Reynolds. Thank you. Peace and power to you. See you next Tuesday.
Another plane, I don't do the basic. Another plane, I don't need to chase it. Elevate.
Peace and power.
True.